What's up guys, and welcome to this week's video of We Are the Bonsai Supply. I am Jerome, and today we're going to work on one of my all-time favorite species. So Japanese maples are really amongst one of my favorite species for bonsai because they're so beautiful and they're ever-changing throughout the year. And throughout the years as well, as they mature and get older, they also change, like the bark starts to turn more of a white instead of being just green. And I really love the leaves. I love that they change their leaf colors in the fall and just really put on a show. Today we're going to work on this pre-bonsai Japanese maple, which I have picked up at a regular garden nursery or a garden center. And this tree, this has never been worked or has never been touched in terms of like turning it into a bonsai tree. Now, right now it's fall here in Georgia, so it is the middle of November, and this is where the trees start to change their leaf colors. And once they have put on a show, once you see the entire tree has turned to like a bright red or a yellow, and then after that, once the entire tree has changed its leaf color, and then the leaves start to look a little ratty, like you see here, where you can see that the green color has been completely stripped out of the leaves, and you can see how the red and the yellow also starts to leave the leaf, and you can see the edges here on the leaf, they start to kind of crinkle up. And that's a really good time to go in here and just help the tree along and manually defoliate the tree. And this really varies the timing per climate as well per deciduous species that you have. But Japanese maples, this is what you look out for, is when the leaves start to crinkle up a little bit. That's when you know it's a good time to go in here and start to remove all the leaves. And the reason why you want to do that is because as the tree goes dormant, goes to sleep, it is a really good time to go in and do your first styling on a new piece of material that you have, do some large cuts that will then heal over in the spring as the tree pushes out new growth. So this is a really good time to go in here and do this work. But you have to look out because you only have about 2 to 3 weeks to perform any work. If the tree is completely asleep, it is too late, and then at that point you would want to wait until spring to start to do any type of trimming or wiring on the tree, because all the branches will start to dry up now in the winter a little bit, and if you start to trim at that point and make really large cuts, then the branches are going to dry out even more. So right now is a perfect time in the fall as the leaves start to change. And all we do is we just go in here and just start to pull off the leaves. And as you can see, they fall right off. Alright, so the first thing that I did when I got this tree, I used a chopstick and I just removed some of the topsoil just to see what the root spread does. So whichever direction the root spread went, that's what I wanted to see in order for me to choose the front of the tree. That's always the first thing that I do. I do not care about the rest of the tree really at all. I really care about that nice root spread and that nice movement that comes out of the bottom of the trunk. Now here in the front, as you can see, where the roots start to spread, there's a nice opening down here in the root base, which could make this a really good candidate to be turned into a root over rock. So that could definitely be a possibility, but that's something that we're going to look at once we actually repot this tree in the spring. Another thing to note is that this tree has been grafted right here. So this is the Japanese maple on top, and it has been grafted onto another variety, another species at the bottom. The graft is quite well. It looks really good actually, and I think in some years you won't be able to tell that this tree has ever been grafted, especially since the color of the stock tree as well as the color of the Japanese maple, that grayish, they look really identical. So I think in some years you won't be able to tell that this tree was ever grafted. So when I look at the root spread, the next step that I look for is for branching. So since this is clearly my front here, I looked at the branching and I really like this natural first branch here on your right that comes out of the tree, and then we have the next branch here. So the branching is pretty good. There's another good branch here in the back. Now as we go further up the tree, I see that this branch here is very thick and very dominant and is very far up the tree, where generally you would want to have more finer branches. Now it of course depends on what type of design you go for. If you go for a very old and naturalistic type of tree, then it is okay to have thicker branches towards the top. But this tree, I want to kind of turn it into like a traditional Japanese maple, where you have the thickest branches at the bottom and they get thinner towards the top. So that's why I know right away that this branch here could be a problem. But I also see that the entire tree is very, very tall and very, very long. And so I think what we're going to do is we're actually going to shorten this tree and turn this into more of a shorter tree versus a very tall tree. Before we go ahead and shorten anything, let's get rid of all the branches that we know that are not going to be staying on the design at all. So the first branch that we're going to look at here is this very first branch. And what I like about it a lot is because it has a very natural feel to it. And it's also pretty thick, which is nice as well. So it comes out of the tree and it kind of makes a little dip down, and then it goes up and then out, as you can see here. So this is really nice. I'm going to keep this branch definitely as my first branch. But then as I turn the tree around, on the back of the tree, you see how there's two more branches that come out of the exact same spot as this very thick one. And these two branches, they have to be removed today, immediately. And that could create a problem in the very near future if I kept all three branches here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut these branches right off, these two. And the problem that these branches create are that they actually thicken up this area too much, and it creates like a little knot, and it just looks really ugly. And then in the future you would have to go ahead and remove that branch anyways. All right, so as you can see, there's a little gray ring right below my cut. So the citrus trees, you want to cut them back to this type of ring here that you can see where it has hardened. And then in the spring, when the tree starts to grow, we can come back and then cut this back flush to the tree, and then we don't leave any ugly scar here. So this time of the year, I just cut back to that ring, leave it alone, put some cut paste on it, and then in the spring, once the first flush has hardened off, that's when I come in and then cut this back nicer. Once I have a lot more water movement in all of these branches, this will then heal over in no time. So I can now go ahead and continue throughout the rest of the tree and just remove all of these trouble branches. What I pretty much want to look for today is just to lay down the primary branch structure, and I do not worry about anything else right now. Alright, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to shorten the tree and just keep this tree about this size. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and start to wire the entire tree. And as we get up more to the top, I'm going to decide if I have one of these two guys become the apex or this one. So this is what it looks like so far, and we're going to go ahead and wire now. So this is what it looks like now. Obviously, I just gave it its very first styling, so I was just focusing on the primary branches facing into the right direction. Most likely, most of these branches are going to be replaced throughout the process of training this tree anyways. This side is a little sparse. There's no branches here. We could do a thread graft for this side using some branches from here, threading them through the center, and then we have branches over here as well. It's not a big deal. Most likely I'll also get some branches in here that will backbud in the spring. I used one of these branches here and I moved it up to be the new apex. In the spring, when the first growth hardens off, I'm going to come back in here and then adjust this knuckle in here and cut it more at an angle, so that once this starts to take off and thicken up the entire tree, this will heal over quite nicely and you will never be able to tell that there was a cut made to begin with. I put a little spool of wire at the bottom here to tilt the tree up a little bit. If it goes on a rock, I think this will be kind of the way that I would look into having it placed, the angle, because you have a lot of movement. And I do think the overall height should be around this height, not much taller than that. I think that would look really, really cool. Couple things to note on Japanese maples. The scars, they do not heal that easy. You will always see them, especially on the trunk. So if you leave the wire on for too long and the wire starts to bite in, it is almost impossible to get the wire scarring out of the Japanese maple trunk. That's definitely something to look out for once this tree starts to bud in the spring. I want to keep a really close eye on the wire. Alright, so now that we did the first fall styling era of this tree, let's go ahead and talk about the winter care of Japanese maples. So really important, and this can also again change from climate, but in general, you want to make sure that you keep your Japanese maples above 26 degrees Fahrenheit. Now here in Georgia, the winters are quite mild and the temperatures really don't go below 26 that often. However, they do go on some occasions below 26. So here's a couple of things that you can do if your temperatures drop below 26, but you still want to make sure that you keep the roots warm, which is the most important. So keep it out of the wind and keep the roots warm. If you guys have any questions on Japanese maple, please comment below in the description, and also let me know what you think of my very first Japanese maple styling, and I'll catch you guys next time.